Why did the courtroom fall silent the moment she rolled in, like everyone sensed something about her that she hadn't shown yet? Captain Maya Donovan felt the weight of those eyes before she even cleared the doorway. Rows of strangers, reporters, lawyers, Marines, all turning, all judging, all wondering what a woman in a wheelchair could possibly say that mattered in a case this large. She kept her gaze forward, kept her breath steady, kept the storm buried under the stillness she'd trained into herself. The San Diego Federal Courthouse was cold that morning, not the kind of cold you feel on your skin, but the kind that forms inside people who expect confrontation, threat, truth, everyone waiting for something to break. She wheeled toward the witness stand, her charcoal gray suit neat, her posture rigid, her expression unreadable. On her lapel, the small navy cross pin, blue ribbon, silver starburst, caught the lights in a soft gleam. She didn't touch it this time, didn't reach for the quiet reassurance it once gave her. Not here, not under the gaze of Judge Prescott. He watched her with something colder than skepticism, something personal, though she couldn't yet tell why. "Please state your name and occupation for the record," the clerk said. "Captain Maya Donovan," she answered, voice even. "United States Marine Corps, retired. I currently work as an independent military equipment consultant." She felt not heard, the whisper ripple through the gallery. The trial had been national news for weeks. Titan defense systems on one side, powerful, wealthy, untouchable for years. The Department of Justice on the other, armed with allegations, wounded Marines, and a stack of classified documents that no one had been allowed to read until today. And her somewhere in the middle, a living contradiction, a woman who had nearly died for her Marines, now being asked to testify against the company whose decisions had nearly killed them. But there was something else, something she hadn't told Reyes, the young prosecutor, something she hadn't told anyone. Something she knew would matter, but couldn't yet say. Reyes stood. "Your Honor, the prosecution calls Captain Donovan to testify regarding the field performance of Titan's T-47 body armor system." Before he could continue, Victor Ashford, Titan's star attorney, rose from the defense table like a man built from polished stone. "If it please the court," Ashford said, "we need to establish the witness's qualifications." Of course, he was beginning the attack early. Ashford approached with calculated politeness, every step rehearsed for this exact moment. "Captain," he began, "can you clarify the extent of your combat experience?" Maya didn't blink. Multiple deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, special operations tasking, various classified assignments. "Classified," he repeated loudly, eyeing the gallery as though performing for them. "How convenient." That earned a few soft chuckles from Titan's side. Ray stood. "Your Honor." "Sit down, counselor," Judge Prescott snapped. His voice alone tightened the air. Maya turned toward him, trying to understand the hostility radiating from the bench. He wasn't just skeptical. He was offended by her existence, as if she had violated something sacred simply by arriving in his courtroom. "Captain Donovan," Prescott said, leaning forward, "you understand this court cannot properly evaluate your testimony if you hide behind classification." "I'm not hiding," she replied softly. "I'm following federal law." His jaw clenched, and then his gaze dropped to her lapel. "What is that pin?" he asked sharply. Maya felt her heartbeat shift. "My Navy Cross, Your Honor." Silence snapped through the room. Judge Prescott stared at her like she had spoken blasphemy. "Your Navy Cross," he repeated slowly, as if testing the words. "Yes, sir." Ashford lifted a hand, as though reluctantly joining the performance. "Your Honor, the Navy Cross is awarded only for extraordinary heroism in direct combat, typically to individuals in the most extreme engagements." He turned to Maya with polite malice. "And yet, Captain Donovan served during a period when women were restricted from certain combat roles." The implication was clear. The laughter from Titan's corner sharper this time. Maya kept still, kept calm, kept her breathing even. Inside, a familiar ache bloomed, a mixture of anger and exhaustion, of being underestimated, doubted, erased. There it was again. The thing she hadn't told them. Not yet. Ray stood again, color rising to his face. Your Honor, Captain Donovan's service record has been submitted under seal. This line of questioning is unnecessary. Unnecessary, Prescott snapped, or inconvenient. His voice boomed. Then, with a coldness that cut through the room, Captain Donovan, remove that pin. Her breath caught. Your Honor, Ray's whispered. Remove that pin, Prescott repeated, louder this time. I will not tolerate stolen valor in my courtroom. The gallery gasped. Stolen valor. The accusation hit harder than a bullet. She felt every eye on her, felt old memories pressing at the edges of her vision, sand, fire, screaming voices, the weight of another Marine in her arms as she dragged him through dust and blood. The moment her spine shattered, the moment the world went white. But outside she remained still, calm, controlled. Your Honor, Reyes protested, this is outrageous. Contempt is on the table, Prescott warned. Remove it now. Maya swallowed. Her hands were steady as she reached up. That surprised even her. The Navy Cross felt heavier than metal, heavier than memory, heavier than the life she'd lost earning it. She unpinned it and set it on the wooden stand. The tiny click of metal on wood echoed like a gunshot. Prescott leaned back, satisfied. Ashford smirked. The defense team looked triumphant. Reyes looked devastated. But Maya, she just breathed. She had been humiliated, discredited, stripped, yet she felt something else beneath the shame. Clarity. A storm gathering. Because Prescott didn't know the truth. No one in this room did. No one except one man who was supposed to be halfway across the country right now. And the moment she heard the rear courtroom doors open with sudden force, she knew. The shift in the room told her everything. Someone had come who wasn't supposed to be here. Someone whose presence would unravel everything Prescott believed. Someone who knew exactly what she had done. Exactly what she had endured. Exactly what she had earned. Maya didn't turn yet. But her heart knew. The truth was coming. And it would hit this courtroom like an airstrike. Why did her hands tremble only when no one was watching? Maya Donovan held her breath as the courtroom shifted into a strange, brittle quiet. The kind where people weren't sure whether to breathe or brace. She kept her gaze steady, her posture controlled, but inside something fragile pressed against her ribs. A memory. A fear she thought she'd buried. General Rourke's presence in the courtroom had changed everything, but the storm wasn't over. If anything, it had just found its center. He stopped beside the witness stand, facing Judge Prescott with the kind of calm authority only decades of war can forge. The general didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You owe this Marine an apology, he said. Prescott stiffened. General, this court. This court, Rourke cut in, just humiliated a Navy Cross recipient in front of the nation. Maya lowered her gaze for a heartbeat, the accusation slicing through her, not because it was untrue, but because she didn't want the world to see her as someone who needed defending. She had built her life around not needing anyone, not anymore. Rourke wasn't done. Your Honor, you treated her as if she were some imposter wearing a medal she didn't earn, but I was there. I signed off on the citation myself. I saw the footage. I saw the aftermath. Captain Donovan didn't just earn that medal, she survived it. He said the last words quietly. Too quietly. Because they awakened the one memory Maya had tried so hard to keep underwater. A flash of sand, smoke, and light. A scream, not hers, echoing through a radio lost in static. A decision she made in a single breath, knowing what it would cost, knowing she would never walk again. But the courtroom didn't know that story yet. They only knew the surface, and surfaces could lie. Prescott exhaled sharply. "General, while your testimony—" "This isn't testimony," Rourke interrupted. "This is truth." Truth. The one thing Maya feared more than lies. Because the truth wasn't clean. It wasn't heroic. It wasn't the kind of story people framed and hung on walls. It was broken, painful, and carved into her spine like shrapnel still digging deeper every day. She lifted her eyes and finally met Rourke's gaze. He softened just slightly. "It's time, Captain." Time for what, she wondered. But a part of her already knew. Prescott cleared his throat. "General Rourke, if you wish to address the court formally, you will take the stand." Rourke nodded and stepped onto the stand with steady, deliberate movements. The man never rushed anything, except, apparently, getting here today. Reyes approached, young voice shaky, clearly caught between relief and awe. "General, could you describe your relationship to Captain Donovan?" Rourke's answer was simple. "She saved my Marines." Those 4 words flipped the room. Ashford's smirk faded. Prescott's arrogance cracked. Even the reporters sat up straighter, sensing the narrative they thought they understood unraveling at its seams. Rourke continued. "It happened during Operation Silver Dune. Information on it remains sealed, but I can speak to one part of it, the part that matters." He paused, letting the weight settle. Her team had been ambushed outside of Al-Qasid. Enemy fighters hit them from 3 directions. The terrain offered no cover, and they were outnumbered at least 5-1. He inhaled deeply through his nose. "By the time I was notified, surveillance drones showed the platoon pinned down, casualties rising, escape routes blocked." Maya felt her chest tighten. Not because of the memory of the ambush, but because of the memory just before it. The last moment of stillness. The last time her body had obeyed her without hesitation. Rourke's voice softened. "And then we saw something unexpected. The feed captured one Marine breaking from the formation, moving fast, too fast, no hesitation, running straight into the open." Reyes swallowed, "And that Marine was—" Rourke looked directly at Prescott. "Captain Maya Donovan." A ripple of disbelief tore through the crowd. Ashford stood abruptly. "Objection, women were not assigned to infantry platoons at that time." Rourke turned and leveled him with a stare sharp enough to silence a battalion. "You think war cares who carries the rifle. That day, she was the only Marine in position to save them. And she did." He leaned forward slightly. "Because of her, 12 Marines lived. 12, but the enemy flanked her. She took a hit, then another, then—" Maya exhaled sharply. The memory flooded in. The dust, the burning in her spine, the sudden collapse of her legs as the world tilted sideways and her rifle slipped from her grip. But the worst memory wasn't the pain. It was the radio. Her voice shaking as she said, "I'm hit, but keep moving." She never forgot the silence that followed. The silence of men who didn't want to leave her behind, until she barked the order through clenched teeth. She forced herself back to the present as Rourke's voice steadied. She held them off long enough for extraction, long enough for reinforcements to break through enemy lines, long enough for her team to survive. Reyes spoke softly, "And the spinal injury." Rourke nodded slowly. "Permanent, but the sacrifice saved the mission." The room was motionless. Even Prescott seemed momentarily lost in something resembling conscience. But Maya felt none of the glory, none of the admiration, none of the pride the story usually stirred in people. Inside her, something small and fragile whispered. If they knew the whole truth, would they still see her the same way? Because there was a part of the story Rourke never spoke about, a detail buried in classified reports, a decision she made that haunted her nights. She'd gone into that field not just to save the platoon. but to save one Marine in particular. A Marine who never made it home. A face she still saw in every quiet moment, every dark room, every time she woke in the night with her jaw clenched and her hands shaking. Ray stepped forward, voice nearly a whisper. "General, why did you come here today? Why now?" Rourke turned toward Maya, his eyes softened again. Because she wasn't going to defend herself. She never does. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. And suddenly Maya felt exposed in a way she hadn't expected. Not humiliated, exposed. Seen. The thing she had spent years hiding, the quiet belief that maybe she wasn't the hero people said she was. Maybe she was just someone who survived the wrong things for the wrong reasons. Rourke continued quietly. She would have let this court call her a fraud if it meant protecting others. That's who she is. Maya closed her eyes briefly. A single thought cut through her. He still doesn't know what I did that day. Not the part that matters most. Not the part that still keeps her awake. Not the part she still hasn't said out loud. Reyes took a breath. Your Honor, based on this testimony, the defense's accusation of stolen valor. Withdrawn, Ashford said quickly, but his voice wavered. We withdraw it. He didn't look at Prescott. Prescott didn't look at anyone. The judge cleared his throat. Captain Donovan, you may retrieve your pen. Maya stared down at the Navy cross resting on the wood beside her hand. Such a small object, such a heavy burden. She reached for it, hesitated, then closed her fingers around it. Warm metal, cold memory. And beneath it all something else. The truth she had avoided. The truth that was coming for her whether she wanted it or not. Because there were two stories in this courtroom. The one Rourke told. And the one she had lived. Only one of them was complete. And the court hadn't heard hers yet. Why did the truth always feel the heaviest right when she was about to speak it? Maya held the Navy cross in her hand, its edges pressing gently into her palm as if reminding her of everything she had not yet said. The courtroom waited, a quiet held taut like wire. Cameras aimed. Reporters leaned forward. Even the judge's pen stopped moving. They all expected her to reclaim pride, dignity, vindication. But all she felt was pressure. Not from outside. From inside. That unbearable sense that her story wasn't done. That Rourke's version was only the clean outline around a much darker center. A center she had never shared with anyone, not fully. Not even with the general who had stood by her today. Reyes approached, adjusting his tie with slightly shaky fingers. Captain Donovan, he said softly, we'd like you to continue your testimony. Continue. As if she knew where to begin. Her throat tightened. Because the real story didn't start with bravery. It started with guilt. She lifted her chin. The room sharpened into focus. The faces blurred into shapes, but the weight of their attention pressed on her like a physical force. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. What General Rourke said is true, but it's not the whole story. A murmur rippled across the gallery. Ashford's eyes narrowed. Prescott leaned in, sensing something unexpected. Ray stepped closer. Captain, whenever you're ready. Was she ready? She didn't know. She wasn't even sure the truth belonged in a courtroom. It belonged in desert wind, in broken radios, in the memory of a man whose name she hadn't spoken aloud in years. She inhaled slowly. The mission wasn't supposed to happen like that, she began. We weren't supposed to be there that day. My team was scheduled for extraction 12 hours earlier. Then why were you? Reyes asked. Maya swallowed. Because someone disappeared. That word disappeared stopped everything. Even Rourke stiffened. Prescott frowned. Explain. She hesitated, the cold tightening in her chest. One of our intelligence specialists. He went missing 2 miles north of our landing zone. He was 23, quiet, obsessed with radios and signals. We called him. She stopped, voice faltering. Rourke finished it for her. We called him Sparks. Her breath trembled at the sound of his name. Sparks, the kid who always sat by her during briefings, who asked questions others were afraid to ask, who once told her she reminded him of his big sister because she walked like she was protecting someone. He shouldn't have been in the field that day. But he had gone anyway. Reyes glanced at the judge. Your Honor, this information was not in the original case file. Because it was classified, Rourke said, still is. Not anymore, Maya whispered. Not for me. She leaned forward in her wheelchair, eyes fixed on her hands. Sparks left the Humvee at 500 hours. He detected a signal, something encrypted, something he believed was connected to a weapons transfer we'd been tracking. We told him to wait for backup. He didn't. She paused. He thought he could handle it. Ashford interjected sharply. What does this have to do with Titan defense? Maya didn't even look at him. Everything. Because the signal he followed came from equipment that wasn't supposed to be there. Equipment Titan supplied. A shiver of shock swept the room. Reyes' eyes widened. Captain, are you saying? I'm saying Sparks walked into a trap built with Titan hardware. She felt the room freeze. And yet, strangely, the weight in her chest began to lift. Not relief, not release, just the familiar clarity of truth finally spoken. He was alive when we found him, she continued, voice trembling. Barely. The enemy used the T-47 communications decoy to mimic one of our encrypted beacons. Sparks thought he was tracking a friendly unit. She blinked hard, forcing herself not to look away from the memory. He was. The silence that followed was deep and painful. Reyes whispered, Captain, what happened next? She looked at him, but she answered to the room. We mounted an unscheduled rescue. That's why we stayed past our extraction window. That's why we were in the open. That's why the ambush happened. Prescott stared at her with a newfound stillness. The trap that killed 3 Marines and crippled me, Maya said softly, began with Titan's equipment malfunctioning. Again. Ashford shot to his feet. Objection, this is unverified, emotional, and irrelevant. But Rourke stood too, voice hard as iron. It's verified. I saw the after-action report. Titan's internal logs registered the signal error 27 minutes before Sparks walked into it. They ignored it. The room erupted. Shout, gasps, voices rising. Prescott slammed his gavel. Order, order. Maya felt Rourke's eyes on her, not judging, just seeing her, understanding her pain in a way he couldn't before. Because now he knew the part she had hidden. Reyes approached again, softer this time. Captain, you've carried this alone for years, haven't you? Her breath trembled. He died in my arms. She never said those words before, not to anyone. Rourke's jaw clenched. She blinked through the burn in her eyes. He kept apologizing for going alone, for getting captured, for everything. And I kept telling him it wasn't his fault, but he didn't believe me. Her voice cracked. And when I got hit, when my legs stopped working, all I could think was that I failed him, that I didn't get there fast enough, that I didn't protect him like I promised. A tear slid down her cheek. But they called me a hero, she whispered. They pinned a medal on me while I couldn't even stand, and all I could think about was the 1 Marine I didn't save. The courtroom was silent. Not the stunned silence from earlier. A different one. One that carried respect. Reyes spoke gently. Captain Sparks walked into a trap created by Titan's negligence. That ambush happened because they didn't fix a critical flaw. You saved 12 Marines that day. You did everything a leader could do. You didn't fail him. But the words didn't soothe her. They never had. Because guilt, once rooted deep enough, grows like a second heartbeat. Prescott cleared his throat, voice unexpectedly softer. Captain Donovan, thank you for your candor. She nodded without looking at him. She wasn't done. "There's something else," she said. The room tensed again. Rourke turned toward her with concern. "Maya." "No," she whispered. "They need to hear this." She faced the jury with a steady gaze. Titan tried to cover up the signal malfunction. They altered logs. They pressured officers. They tried to bury it. The Navy Cross citation you reviewed, Your Honor, the one you doubted, that medal was issued only after 3 other reports were destroyed. Ray's froze. Rourke's face darkened. Prescott looked physically ill. And Ashford paled like someone had just cut the ground from under him. Maya continued. "You wanted the truth, all of you. Well, that's the truth. I didn't want the medal. I didn't want recognition. I wanted the investigation reopened. I wanted Sparks' family to know what really happened." She placed the Navy Cross on the stand again. And Titan made sure they never did. The room erupted again, unstoppable this time. Rays yelled for order. Prescott hammered his gavel uselessly. Reporters spilled into the aisles. Cameras flashed. Voices collided. But Maya heard none of it. She just breathed. For the first time in years, she breathed without the weight of silence pressing against her ribs. The truth was out. But consequences, those were only beginning. Why did the room feel heavier after the truth came out? Like justice itself was deciding which way to fall. Maya didn't look at the crowd, the cameras, the reporters rushing to send headlines. She didn't need to. The weight in the courtroom told her everything. The defense was shaken, the judge unsettled, the prosecution stunned. Rourke's jaw was iron, and Ashford, Titan's polished storm of arrogance, now blinked like a man who'd been slapped awake. But the one she expected to break the silence was Judge Prescott. He didn't. Instead, he stared at the Navy Cross she'd set on the wood again, like it was something radioactive. Something that could obliterate everything he believed about her, about the case, about his own authority. Rays finally found his voice. "Your Honor, the witness's testimony directly implicates Titan in negligence, cover-ups, and willful endangerment of Marines. We request an immediate evidentiary review." Ashford shot up. "This is unsubstantiated emotional conjecture." "It's truth," Rourke said sharply, rising with controlled fury. "And you know it." Prescott massaged his temple, his expression taut with conflict. "General Rourke, Captain Donovan, both of you understand the implications of releasing classified information in open court." Maya lifted her chin. "I understand what silence has cost." Ray stepped forward. "Your Honor, we can file the rest under sealed proceedings, but to ignore this testimony would be—" "Enough," Prescott snapped. But his voice didn't carry the same thunder it had earlier. Not after what he'd learned. The authority he used like a weapon had begun to crack at the edges. He leaned back, staring at Maya with a strange combination of embarrassment and something she couldn't place, respect maybe, or regret. "Captain Donovan," he said slowly, "you may step down." She didn't move at first. Her hands rested on her wheels, fingers curled slightly. "There's more." The entire room froze again. Rourke turned sharply. "Maya, don't." "It's time," she whispered. He looked pained, truly pained. "You're not obligated to." "I am." Because she knew exactly what she'd hidden the longest. What she'd feared the most. What she had to say before this trial could mean anything at all. Prescott rubbed his forehead. "Captain, if you have additional testimony, I'll hear it. But be aware anything further could place you at risk, legally, professionally, personally." She almost smiled. "I know, sir." She had lived in risk for so long it was practically a home. Rays hesitated, then nodded for her to continue. Maya inhaled slowly, grounding her voice. "The ambush wasn't just because of Titan's malfunctioning equipment. It was also because of a decision I made." Rourke's head snapped toward her. "Stop." "She didn't." I ordered the team deeper into the canyon. I told them we could recover sparks. I told them I had intel we didn't have. Reyes blinked. Captain, what intel? She exhaled shakily. None. The air in the room died. Prescott leaned forward, stunned. You lied to your unit. Maya's eyes fell to her hands. I did. Even Ashford faltered. Rourke's voice cracked with hurt. Why didn't you tell me this? Her answer was quiet but sharp. Because you would have taken command away from me. You would have pulled me out, and I couldn't allow that. Why? Reyes asked softly. Her throat tightened. She didn't want to say it. But she had already opened the door. She couldn't close it now. Because Sparks wasn't just my specialist, she whispered. He was my responsibility. I put him on the signal task. I encouraged him. I told him his instincts were good, that he had potential, that if he trusted himself, he'd grow into a leader. Her voice trembled. And he trusted me too much. Prescott's expression softened with something that looked very human. Reyes stepped closer. Captain, the ambush wasn't your fault. She shook her head. It doesn't matter. I told myself we could get him out without help. I told myself I had enough training, enough experience, enough instinct to lead us past the danger. Her jaw clenched. But the truth is, I made the decision because I couldn't lose him. Not again. Her voice cracked again. Rourke whispered again. The room stilled as she swallowed hard, forcing the words out. My first deployment, Afghanistan. A radio operator under my watch died in a roadside blast. He was 20, never fired a shot. His name was Carter. She blinked rapidly to steady herself. Sparks reminded me of him. Same awkward smile, same determination, same habit of humming under his breath when he was nervous. A sad smile flickered briefly on her lips. And when the signal popped that morning, when he went after it alone, all I could think was, not again, not another kid under my watch. Rourke looked gutted. Reyes whispered, so you chased the ghost of a mistake. She nodded, yes, and by doing that I made a bigger one. Her voice broke on the next line. If I had waited, if I had followed protocol, we wouldn't have been in that canyon. I wouldn't be in this chair. Sparks might be alive. And the Marines who died in that ambush, their families might still be whole. A long silence followed. Not judgmental. Not accusatory. Just heavy. Human. Reyes spoke gently. Captain, no soldier gets to rewrite the past, but you did your duty. You saved lives. But I also cost lives, she whispered. Rourke stepped closer, anger melting into heartbreak. And how long have you carried that alone? She looked up at him. Since the moment I felt my legs disappear. The confession cracked something open in him. He sank into the seat beside her, shaking his head slowly. Maya, you cannot punish yourself for a war no one could have controlled. I'm not punishing myself, she whispered. I'm telling the truth. Prescott cleared his throat, voice quieter than before. Captain Donovan, guilt and responsibility are not the same thing. You made a decision under extreme conditions. That is the burden of command. She nodded slightly, but she didn't look relieved. Because she wasn't trying to absolve herself. She was trying to understand herself. Reyes found his voice again. Captain, before we move on, I need one thing clarified for the record. Regardless of the mistakes, regardless of protocol, was your intention to save your Marines? Her eyes lifted to the jury. Yes, she said simply. Every decision I made, right or wrong, was to save them. The jury nodded subtly, almost in unison. Rourke put a hand on her shoulder, a gesture he had never allowed himself before. You did save them. She met his eyes, not all. But you saved who you could, he replied. Her throat tightened. I wish that was enough. He squeezed her shoulder. It is, even if you don't believe it yet. The moment held for a breath, then two. Reyes turned to the judge. Your Honor, the witness has provided critical testimony that changes the direction of this trial. Prescott nodded slowly. It does. And for the first time, Maya saw the truth in his eyes, the very thing she had never expected. Respect. Ashford sank into his chair, pale and wordless. Titan's CEO rubbed his forehead in dread. Maya lowered her gaze to the Navy cross in her hand. This time she didn't feel shame, just a quiet ache. And beneath it, a strange, unfamiliarly gentle feeling. Relief. For the first time in years. But she couldn't rest yet. Because the storm wasn't finished. Not even close. Why did the truth feel quieter when it finally settled, like a storm that had screamed itself empty? The courtroom had become something else now, not a battlefield, not a stage, something softer, something human. The tension that once coiled around every corner had loosened, leaving only the echo of everything Maya had revealed. Judge Prescott no longer looked like a man balancing power. He looked like a man rethinking every assumption he'd walked in with. Reyes stood steady, but his expression held the weight of both admiration and sadness. Rourke stayed close to Maya, not as a superior officer, but as someone who understood what breaking open felt like. But Ashford, his mask was cracking. And Titan's CEO, Harold Grant, sharp suit, cold posture, finally leaned forward for the first time, realizing the empire he'd built on silence had just been set on fire. Prescott cleared his throat. It was surprisingly soft. Captain Donovan, thank you for your honesty. This court recognizes the courage it takes to speak truth that pains you. Maya didn't respond. She didn't trust her voice yet. Reyes stepped forward. Your Honor, we formally request the court admit the new testimony and order an immediate review of Titan defense systems, internal communications, logs, and manufacturing reports. Ashford rose, attempting composure. Your Honor, we object. This testimony is emotionally charged, lacking technical verification. Denied, Prescott said, almost before Ashford finished speaking. This court will not ignore credible allegations of military misconduct and data manipulation. Ashford blinked, stunned. Prescott turned to Maya. Captain, do you have anything further you wish to add before we recess for the evidentiary hearing? She hesitated. There was one last truth. One she hadn't planned to say aloud. One that mattered more than guilt, more than medals, more than the past that haunted her. Her voice came out soft. Yes, Your Honor, just one thing. The room quieted. She looked out at the crowd, not for them, for herself. For years, I thought the medal was a burden because I didn't deserve it, because I walked my team into danger, because I lost sparks, because I survived what others didn't. Her breath trembled. But standing here now, I realize the truth is simpler. She looked down at the Navy cross in her hand. I wasn't afraid of not deserving it. She lifted her eyes. I was afraid of what it asked of me. The courtroom held its breath. She continued, voice steadier. It asked me to live, to honor the people I lost by continuing to move forward, and I didn't know how. I didn't know if I was strong enough to carry their memory without breaking. Reyes looked at her with something like awe. Rourke looked like he might break himself. But today, she said softly, speaking the truth, I think I finally understand. The medal was never about perfection. It was a reminder that I did everything I could, that sometimes everything we can is enough. Her voice shook on the last sentence. Prescott nodded slowly, respectfully. She placed the Navy cross gently on the witness stand. Not as surrender, as acceptance. The judge exhaled. Captain Donovan, you may step down. Rourke moved instinctively as though to assist her, but she shook her head, quietly, gratefully. She maneuvered her chair away from the stand with a steadiness she hadn't felt in years. As she passed Rourke, he lowered his voice. I'm proud of you." The words struck deeper than she expected. She didn't answer, she didn't know how. Reyes began gathering his files, the adrenaline in his hands giving away how monumental the day had become. Titan's defense team whispered frantically. Grant muttered orders to Ashford, scrambling. The storm was hitting them now. Not her. Not anymore. Prescott banged his gavel. Court will recess until further notice pending review of new evidence. Chairs scraped, voices rose, reporters surged, but Maya, she felt strangely still. Rourke touched her arm lightly. "You okay?" She almost laughed, almost. "No," she whispered, "but maybe I will be." He nodded. "That's enough." They headed toward the exit, but before they reached the doors, a woman stepped into their path. Early 40s, nervous hands, soft eyes rimmed red. Maya recognized the face before the name. Sparks' mother. She had flown in for the trial weeks ago, hopping quietly for answers she never got. Until now. She looked at Maya for a moment, just looked, and Maya felt every muscle in her chest tighten. She braced for anger, accusation, the grief she had feared for so many years. But Sparks' mother only whispered, "Thank you for staying with him." The words hit harder than any accusation could have. Maya swallowed. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, voice cracking. "I should have protected him." The woman shook her head firmly. "You did. You gave him someone to believe in. You stayed with him when he was scared. That matters more than you know." Maya blinked hard, tears burning. "He talked about you," the woman added faintly. "Said you made him feel like he belonged." Maya bowed her head. "I wish I could have saved him." "He died knowing someone cared." Sparks' mother reached out and gently squeezed Maya's hand. "That saved something too." Maya closed her eyes, letting the weight of those words settle in places she'd kept locked for years. When she opened them again, the woman smiled, sad, grateful, and stepped away. Outside the courtroom, the sun struck her skin like a warmth she wasn't used to anymore. Reporters shouted. Cameras flashed. Questions flew in every direction. Rourke stepped in front of her like a shield. "No comments today," he barked. Reyes tried to get control of the chaos. "Please move back, give the captain space." But Maya wasn't thinking about cameras, or headlines, or trials. She was thinking of Sparks, of Carter, of the Marines who made it home, and the ones who didn't. And for the first time, the memories didn't crush her. They breathed with her. Rourke stood beside her. "You changed everything today." She glanced up at him. "I didn't do it alone." "No," he said softly, "but you were the one who finally spoke." They walked or rolled together down the courthouse steps. The chaos faded behind them. The world felt open in a way she hadn't felt in years. Vulnerable, yes, but possible. At the bottom of the steps, the sun shifted, catching the small ribbon still resting on her lap. She held the medal again, gently, with no fear this time. "Will you keep it now?" Rourke asked. Maya looked at him, then down at the Navy Cross. A faint, calm smile touched her lips. "Yes," she whispered, "but not for me." "For who then?" he asked softly. She lifted the medal, letting the sunlight catch it. "For them," she said. Her voice didn't waver. "And for the promise to carry them forward, without hiding any more." Rourke nodded, pride softening every line of his face. She glanced back at the courthouse one last time, the place where she had been humiliated, exposed, broken open, and finally put back together. Not perfectly, but honestly. They started walking again, and as the wind brushed against her skin, a warm, gentle wind, she understood something she had never allowed herself to believe. Healing wasn't an award ceremony. It wasn't public. It wasn't loud. It was this, quiet, private, choosing to go forward even when the past walked beside her. And as she crossed the last step onto the pavement, she felt the truth of it settle in her bones. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.